Everybody loves a good story, and the story of the birth of Christ has been called the greatest story ever told. Over the past few weeks and in the weeks to come, we have heard the story of the birth of Christ told from the perspective of those who witnessed it firsthand. We've heard from Joseph and Mary, and this week we'll hear from the angels, and next week the shepherd, and then the magi. But there's one group we haven't heard from that much, and we don't normally hear from them, and that's the animals. I just played The Friendly Beast, which is one of my favorite Christmas songs. I always remember growing up, that was always one that we did at every Christmas pageant I can ever remember. Well, today I want to tell us a story that is the birth of Christ from the perspective of the animals that were there. This story comes from an old friend of our family, the Reverend Harold Bales. Harold was a minister in our conference for many, many years. He passed away a few years ago. But he told this story to his daughter. It was one of her favorite stories. And we also included this in a book of Christmas reflections that he wrote many years ago. And I thought it was just so appropriate that I wanted to share it with you today as part of our devotional time. Once upon a time, when the world was much younger, a wonderful thing happened in a faraway little town called Bethlehem. All of the creatures in the shepherd's stable were soundly sleeping. All were sleeping except Mr. Owl, who sat upon a tree limb just outside the door. He loved to sit there in the dark and watch while others slept. Suddenly his yellow eyes grew big as he watched intruders quietly enter the barnyard. Who, he said. Then he relaxed as he heard the familiar, friendly voice of the shepherd. You'll be safe and warm here. Stay as long as you wish. Then Mr. Owl heard a stranger's voice say, Thank you, sir. With that, the helpful owl flew swiftly to the place where Mrs. Cow stood snoring. Friend Cow, wake up, we have visitors here tonight. Mrs. Cow opened one sleepy eye and mooed softly, Who? Mr. Owl whispered rather indignantly, That's my line. Mrs. Cow, now with both eyes open, said, Oops, sorry. Where? Then she saw the unfamiliar man help a beautiful young woman down from a donkey where she sat so patiently. Mrs. Cow bent low, and with her nose she nudged awake the lamb, who was dreaming of vast fields of grass by cool streams. Master Lamb, don't move. Be still, but look, we have company tonight. Master Lamb twitched and raised his head enough to see the stranger spread a blanket on the hay to make a simple bed. Then he gently bade good night and drifted back to sleep. Mrs. Cow nodded to Miss Colt, who was already wide awake. Look, she said, a donkey friend of yours has brought some guests to spend the night with us. Say welcome to your friend the donkey, will you please? Miss Colt was shy and quiet. She was so excited she didn't want to bray too loudly so as to frighten them with her voice. She was glad to see the tenderness with which the donkey gazed at the weary young girl. Looking down from her nest above, Mother Dove, of all the creatures in the stable, knew what was about to happen. She was a mother after all, and she just knew. There were many other animals scurrying around that night, but they all stopped to watch what these most unusual visitors were doing. However, Miss Spider was so busy spinning her webs in the rafters, she didn't notice what was going on below. Soon all was quiet again, and all the animals were sleeping soundly. Then, shh, was that a cry? Was that a baby's cry they heard? How did a baby get here in the stable? Suddenly all the creatures were wide awake to the baby's cry. A boy! A baby boy! Who would have thought a baby boy would come to their stable? No one except Mother Dove. At once the stable was abuzz with activity. Every quiet creature made quiet sounds of admiration and said what he or she would give to celebrate the birth. Miss Colt, who was trying her best to keep her voice soft and low, brayed a soft "Happy birthday" to the child and said, "I'll give him a seat upon my back when he is old enough and big enough to ride and play." Mrs. Cow mooed happily, "I'll give my manger for a bed. Please lay him here." Mr. Lamb baaed, "I'll offer him my curly wool to help keep him warm." High above the stable floor, Miss Spider turned from her work of spinning silky threads and looked below. "Oh, a baby!" Then she stopped and wondered what gift she could give to express her joy. She looked at him and thought at once, "I'll be his favorite toy." With that, she threw out a silky thread of web far out above his manger bed. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and jumped. Down, down she plunged, stopping just above his head, and bounced there. Back up the thread she sprung, and then she started to swing. She swung and swayed and danced and played. She filled the air with daring leaps and acrobatic moves. She waved her arms and legs enough to make the windmill jealous. Then she looked down and with a tiny hand touched her lips and blew a tender kiss to him. And from the straw he watched her give her playful show, reached out a little hand to her as if to wave, and smiled. A happy Miss Spider smiled back, wondering who he was, as she asked, "Who?" Again, Mr. Owl snapped, "But that's my line. I'll ask him for you." "Who?" Just then from below, the baby's mother softly spoke, "Jesus." As you could hear in the story, the animals gave what they had of themselves. That's all we're asked for. That's all God asks us to give. The final line of one of my favorite Christmas hymns goes something like this. "What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would give a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. But what I can, I give him my heart." That's all he asks.